Hi folks, and welcome to the Meaningful Money Podcast. This is season 17, episode 8. And yeah, I'm back. This is the podcast dedicated to helping you put your finances in order. My name is Pete Matthew, and I'm going to share with you everything you need to know and everything you need to do to secure your financial future. I'm here to help you make sense of money. Here we go. Great to have you with me once again. It is a sad fact of getting older that we become increasingly aware of our own mortality, right? And eventually, for those of us who are in a long-term relationship, we're going to have to face the spectre of losing our partner or of them losing us. Now, obviously, if we're old enough to be in retirement, this is even more of a factor in our minds. And like anything else, we should plan for it. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So as usual, after the main body of the show, I'm going to look at a review that's been left, announce what we're going to be talking about next time, and about Meaningful Academy. But before all that, as usual, this podcast continues to be brought to you with the help of my friends at 7 Investment Management. They have been helping me out here on Meaningful Money for ages and ages and ages, so please do check out what they're up to. Say thank you to them. They're at 7im.co.uk. That's the number 7im.co.uk. Okay, before we dive into the show, it's good to be back into the studio, right? All the nice lights and everything around me, and slightly more controlled white balance and the things that are important to me. But more important than that, I wanted just to say a massive thank you for all of your kind messages while I've been off. I've taken 3 weeks off the podcast, and I don't think I've done that since April 2013. Just by way of explanation, we still don't know what's going on. I'm still knackered a lot of the time. I'm fairly convinced it's something sort of viral or post-viral because I feel fine in my head. There was some concern that I was burnt out back in the 80s and early 90s. I think we called that yuppie flu. But I don't feel burnt out, but my body is knackered a lot of the time. So I am now easing myself back into work very slowly, making some changes to how I work, but for now I'm still under the doctor and trying to get to the bottom of it. But it might mean the odd week where no podcast comes out, but I'm trying to make sure that that's not the case that often, just because I love doing this. I don't want to have breaks from it. It's driven me nuts for the last 3 or 4 weeks, not writing, not recording. It is also going to have implications for the launch of Phase 3 of Meaningful Academy, though that's probably now likely to be in September, I would say. So sorry for all of those of you who are waiting for that. But it's been very humbling, folks, to read all your messages, your emails and stuff. And I'm so grateful for your encouragement. Makes me more determined to get back to full strength as soon as I can. But remember, I got to stay on the right side of Mrs. M. Speaking of Meaningful Academy, don't forget, phases 1 and 2 are open and ready for you to join. Phase 1 is called Financial Foundations. It's all about getting you set up for success, right? Budgeting, basic protection, and understanding of how money works. Loads more besides. That's Financial Foundations. Phase 2 is called Build Wealth, and it teaches you how to invest, how to set and stick to financial goals, all about the different financial products you might come across, and best of all, offers a year's access to Voyant Go, which is the best financial planning app in the world, bar none. Right? So there's loads of great stuff in the Academy. So check it out, meaningfulacademy.com. Everything you need to know is there. Okay, thank you. 4 minutes in, a little bit longer than I would ordinarily wait to get into the meat of the show. So let's get to it now. Losing a life partner is obviously a big deal, right? That's just obvious. And in the natural order of things, this should happen very late in life. But we all know that isn't always the case. And that means that as much as we'd like to ignore the whole idea of it, we should be prepared as much as we can. So I want to look at preparations you can make before the worst happens, and then some thoughts about what needs to happen afterwards. So as always, notes and links from today's show are in the show notes. It's the only link you need to remember while listening to this, meaningfulmoney.tv/RP8 for Retirement Planning Episode 8. Okay, with that, let's look about how to prepare for losing a life partner. Until I'm out of habit, I crashed my own thing with the sound. I'll do that again. There we go. Okay, the first thing we need to do in preparation for this, sounds bizarre, doesn't it? Preparing for losing your partner, right? But, you know, it's just thinking about it ahead of time. But the first thing we need to do is to simplify. Now, this is going to come as absolutely no surprise. I bet some of you are thinking, I bet his first point is going to be about simplification. Yeah, okay, it's important. It's got so many obvious benefits, simplification. I think it really should just be assumed and pursued as a matter of course. Now, I have a rule of thumb that you should make your finances as simple as possible to administer, but no simpler. That is, simplicity mustn't come at the cost of being able to do whatever it is that you need to do with your finances. So I had a conversation recently, for example, with a client. We're advising them on their retirement decumulation process, how they are going to spend the money from their various pots. And in discussing it with them, it looks like they're going to find it easier to manage their near-term and long-term pots of money that they're going to need in the next, say, 5 to 10 years, and then money that they're not going to need for at least 10 years. Probably it's going to be easier for them to manage that on 2 different platforms. Now, simplicity would suggest, and I've come on here and said that you don't need more than one platform, but in this case, it's probably going to be easier for them to have 2 pensions on 2 platforms just to make life easy for them. So take a long look at your finances. Can you list everything to do with your income, outgoings, pensions, investments, bank accounts, all that stuff on, say, 2 sides of A4, right? If not, then probably your financial situation is more complicated than it needs to be. Maybe not, right? We're all different, but probably. Now, if you're the partner who dies first, you want your other half to be able to pick up where you left off quickly and easily, even if they're not financially savvy. They can always get help with the day-to-day stuff, but having everything constructed as simply as possible rather, will make their life obviously much easier. Now, if you've got a degree of separation in your finances, then think through what is likely to be passing to your partner and make sure that they know about all that, and make sure it's all sort of ordered and organized as well as possible. Second thing you need to do to prepare is to communicate, right? Now, I'm sure you can imagine the mood kill if you open a conversation with your partner with, hey, darling, let's open a bottle of wine and talk about what's going to happen when one of us dies, right? Nobody wants to talk about this stuff, but talk about it you must if you want to be as prepared as possible. Now, to my mind at least, there's probably nothing more likely to engender a sense of unease than not knowing about something in advance. Certainly that's the case for me, right? I use an example in my book of when I'm in the dentist. I always ask the dentist to kind of talk me through it and tell me what he's going to do before he does it, therefore helping me be prepared somehow. And in the case of preparing for losing a partner, it's definitely far better, I think, to have thought through and communicated in advance what the implications will be of one of you passing away. Now, a good financial planner can help you with that process, or a solicitor, or even an accountant, because they will help you to lay out exactly what would happen, perhaps what income levels will be when one of you dies, what costs might reduce when there's only one of you left, things like that. Now, obviously, that's nothing that you can't do for yourselves if you want, but it might be helpful to get some outside professional help. Talking about this stuff is challenging enough when the family situation is simple, but if it's a second or subsequent relationship, perhaps with kids from previous relationships that one partner wants to look after, things can get very challenging indeed. So again, just determine that you're not going to let this stuff be a problem for you. And again, a professional advisor can perhaps help to facilitate those discussions if you're finding it a bit too difficult on your own. But you're going to need to find a way to talk about this stuff, a way that works for you. But anything is better than just burying your head in the sand and not dealing with it at all. Third thing we need to do in preparation is to annotate. While discussing your finances, be sure to discuss the future, right? If one partner is more financially savvy than the other and tends to take the lead, then I think it's incumbent on them to make sure that the less engaged partner is able to contribute to the discussion and understand what's going on. And part of that is going to be to write it down, to annotate it. What will happen when one partner dies? And do that, write it down as if they have already died. It sounds a bit morbid, that, but let me explain. So let's take income as an example. So let's say you got a husband and wife. She was a GP and she's got an NHS pension. Maybe he was self-employed and he's got a personal pension. Well, he's going to need to know what her NHS pension will pay out to him when she dies. He's going to need to know what the household outgoings are likely to be with just him at home. So try to take a stab at that. What would food costs be for one, for example? What costs are going to stop? Running the house is probably going to be the same, but council tax will be lower for single occupancy. Any costs that the wife incurs for herself, like club memberships, grooming costs or whatever, they will fall off completely. So bear that in mind as well. And of course, the reverse is true. What happens if he goes first? And having this stuff written down in advance is going to be massively helpful for the one left behind and the people who are helping them. Now, obviously, you've got to keep that document up to date. So maybe set aside some time, perhaps once a year, to do that. It really shouldn't take long once it's set up. And then finally, if you're comfortable in doing so, confide in family members. Bring them into the discussion. If you have named your kids as executors, they will definitely benefit from being part of the discussions and having a copy of whatever it is that you've agreed and have written down. Really what we're aiming for is what I call a WID file, W-I-D, when I die file. It's kind of a quick reference guide to everything that will need to be addressed when one partner dies. Just in summary, and probably not exhaustive, this is what should be in there. A copy of your will and details of where the original is held. Contact details for your executors, plus any professional advisors such as financial advisors, accountants, and solicitors. A list of all your pensions, investments, life insurances, bank and building society accounts, including whose name each one is in, the provider, and the policy or account number for each. Contact phone numbers helpful for each one as well if you really want to be belt and braces. You might want to consider having passwords to accounts in there too, but be careful. Obviously, make sure this document is held securely, so against prying eyes. Maybe a list of standing orders and direct debits, including when in the month they are paid and to whom. A cancel list, including anything that should be cancelled, like club memberships, etc., when one partner dies. Funeral wishes, finally, if those are not expressly part of your will. And maybe you can think of more things that should go in there, but can you imagine how much easier life will be for the partner that's left behind if they have a file like this that they can access when the time comes? And eventually, the dreaded event will come, right? And you might be the partner that's left behind. So what happens now? Let's talk about what we need to do after the event, after one partner passes away. Okay, firstly, remember there's no rush. Okay, obviously, it's stating the obvious. The death of any loved one is a massively challenging event, perhaps the most challenging event in anyone's life. There's a lot to do, obviously. There's a lot to do in the immediate aftermath. You've got to arrange a funeral, notify people who need to be told, generally coping with the immediate practical stuff that needs to be done. And some of those things are going to be financial actions, but I think it's worth mentioning that you've got a little bit of time to gather yourself. Banks and other financial institutions will understand that what you've been through is traumatic, and they won't expect you to have anything really sorted within a week of the funeral, right? You can take your time to get your thoughts together and regroup a little bit after the event. Definitely doesn't need to be 6 months, but a few weeks is fine to get the immediate stuff done. Second thing, you need to understand that this is now up to you. We've often said here, quite often, one partner is the prime mover in the family finances, dealing with the everyday practicalities, while perhaps the other person is a bit more of a passive observer. Now, I understand that every family is different and that this situation might have come about for very good reasons. In the early years of my marriage to Joanne, she handled all of the finances because I was just terrible at it. I would have just brought financial ruin down on us. I have got quite a bit better since then, obviously. But if you're the one who has been hands-off, perhaps for decades, and now you've got to take control, this can be really, really difficult. And perhaps if your partner has been in slow decline, then the handover process might have happened before they passed away, but it isn't always the case. Sometimes a sudden event like a stroke or a traumatic accident can steal your partner away with no warning, just leaving you floundering. Now, obviously, as we've discussed earlier, it's best, ideally, to think ahead to this event and make sure that at the very least, passwords and PIN numbers can be accessed no matter what. I've seen it happen, folks, in real-life situations with my clients where the one left behind has been completely left floundering, not even able to access bank accounts. That's obviously a terrible idea. Now, if you've got a WID file in place, a when I die file, that's going to help massively, but it's time to step up. It's time to shoulder the responsibility right at a time when it's probably the last thing you feel like doing, but it is up to you. Now, third thing, take stock of the day-to-day stuff first. First thing you're going to need to do is to make sure that the household continues to function. And so by that, I mean, make sure bills can be paid, you can buy food and fuel, that sort of thing. Chances are that you've got at least one joint account between you, maybe not, but probably, and perhaps the household bills will go out of that account. So your first job is to make sure, if possible, there's enough money in that account to just run the household for 2 to 3 months. You can just forget about it. Then you're going to need to notify banks, building societies, insurance companies, investment and pension providers of all the accounts which were held in your partner's name. Most of those will be frozen until probate is granted and the estate can be distributed. I'm going to talk a bit more about that next week. That is really the job of the executor, and it may be that you are your partner's executor, but you can delegate to a professional like a solicitor, accountant, or financial planner who specializes in administering estates. Don't hand it over to an amateur. Any money or asset which is held in joint names will probably automatically become fully held by you, probably in almost every case. Sometimes not, but it will still need to be amended so that the records show your sole name after your partner has died. Providers of bank accounts and whatever assets are held in joint names, they're going to want to see a death certificate just to get things into your sole name. You can get quite a few copies of the death certificate. It makes life a lot easier. Once the practicalities of notifying all the providers has been done, you're going to need to take stock of your day-to-day, month-to-month position. How much pension and other income is coming in? What bills are going out? Is there enough income to cover the outgoings? If not, where will you supplement your income from? Just like all of us, we're going to need to get to the stage where you've got a current account for day-to-day ins and outs, and then a savings account buffer that you can draw from if you need to. And then outside that, your wider wealth will be in various investment and pension accounts, perhaps. And all that might take a while to sort out, but eventually you will get yourself in a position where the finances are ticking along nicely and it's all in your name. You might still need to budget carefully to meet your expenses. Remember, you've got to be hands-on, but don't be afraid to ask for help from trusted friends and family if you need it. Number 4, reassess your planning. When the day-to-day stuff is all working nicely, you're going to need to think a little bit further forward and look after your own financial planning. If you've lost your partner while you're still working and earning, you'll need, unfortunately, to reassess your plans for retirement, which previously, of course, you'll have made together. And this can be so difficult. Again, I've seen it happen. Up to that point, all of your planning and dreaming about the future has been with the two of you in mind, and it can seem like a really bleak outlook to consider a future without your best friend and your partner. As difficult as that is, I'm afraid you just can't bury your head in the sand. The future is not going to look after itself, and your partner certainly wouldn't have wanted you to just drift through the rest of your life without them. So try to turn your mind gently to the future, again, perhaps with the help of a trusted friend or a family member, and start to set things in place. If you've lost your partner in much later life, then your future planning is going to largely center around preparing for your own passing one day and making sure that things are tidy for those left behind when you've gone. A little bit more on that in a minute. It might also involve planning for needing care one day, or even moving in with family, or downsizing your home perhaps. Or maybe, it's just planning to buy that Harley Davidson and go riding off into the sunset. Who knows? But again, there's no immediate rush to get on with any of this. Do it in your own time, but again, don't avoid it altogether. We all need to look to the future when it comes to our finances, just to make sure that we're as well prepared for the future as we can be. And then finally, simplify again. Yes, simplify again. Make sure that your own sole name affairs are simple enough for someone else to sort out when the time comes and you yourself pass away. Many times I've worked with people who have just had a nightmare sorting out their parents' affairs, perhaps, and then as a result, they want to make sure that their own affairs are more ordered so that their own kids don't suffer the same fate. Okay, not an easy subject to deal with this. Obviously, it's easy enough for me to talk about in the abstract, but not so easy for you to talk about this between you and your partner if you have one, or for you to take the time and get everything written down for when the time comes. But it is important, right? So Don't forget, call in professional help if you want or you need to. It'll be money well spent. And don't forget, get help from trusted friends, family members to make it as easy as possible. Now, as ever, any questions, just let me know in the comments section of the show notes, which is meaningfulmoney.tv/RP8, or under the video here on YouTube, if that's where you're watching me. Okay, review this week, headlined Friendly, Informative, and Highly Invaluable from Charlie R. Clark. Okay, down to earth and accessible advice for everyone. I love listening to Pete's podcast regularly to stay informed and learn key tips to improve my approach and management of finance. Thanks, Pete. Thank you, Charlie R. Clark. Really appreciate you leaving a review. If you like what you hear on the podcast, please do leave me a review, meaningfulmoney.tv/iTunes. I really should rename that, right? It's no longer called iTunes, but wherever you're listening to this, just leave me a review if you can. 5-star rating and a review just keeps us near the top of the rankings, which really, really helps. Okay, let's have a look. What's next? Meaningful Academy. So I talked about it earlier on. Don't forget, Meaningful Academy is open for phases 1 and 2, which is financial foundations and then build wealth. If you're particularly interested in phase 3, which is all about retirement planning, then you can still head over to meaningfulacademy.com, click to register your interest in that phase, and we'll keep you posted. Also, every Friday, I send out an email called the Meaningful Digest, which is a summary of what's been going on here at Meaningful Money throughout the week, plus some useful links and my general musings about whatever takes my fancy. So if you want to join the many thousands of people who get that email every Friday, head over to the Meaningful Money website. And at the top, there's a little drop down, which offers you the chance to join the mailing list. Okay, next time, we're going to be talking about estate planning and dealing specifically with wills, powers of attorney, introducing trusts. And we'll follow on in episode 10 the following week, and we'll start to talk about multi-generational planning. And that's it, folks, for this session of the Meaningful Money podcast. Good to be back. I hope you enjoyed it. As ever, comments and questions at meaningfulmoney.tv/RP8. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you again for your support over the last few weeks while I've been unwell. Good to be back. I'll talk to you next week. Cheers.